Mel Reyes, welcome to the ISC2 Los Angeles Chapter podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm honored, sir.
Yeah, well, no, we really appreciate having you on. You were a really amazing speaker, I think a couple months back, April, May timeframe.
Sounds about right.
Enjoyed, so I wanted to bring you on for some more deeper dive discussions. So thank you for coming. One of the things you told us at the chapter meeting was that you had set a goal to read over 50 books. So I thought one of the ways we could open is, why don't you tell us about the best book that you've read in the last 6 months?
So in 2000, I set a goal to get back to reading. And that goal was 52 books and accomplished that goal. Took a little bit of a break for a couple of years, only read 20-ish or so books, 15 or 20 books. And then last year I was like, no, I got to get back into it. So I set a goal to read another 52 books. I accepted in the last few years that audiobooks are reading. Don't get me started. So that's how I was able to accomplish a lot of that last year. And what I started to realize was, okay, you know what? I actually do appreciate audiobooks. Every now and then I have to table them and take notes on the side and pause them. But I also started to pick up the fact that given our memory, our brain capacity, our aging, that reading one book at a time could be really boring. So last year I started to read multiple books at the same time.
Guilty.
Not only that, it wasn't just learning and inspirational, it was also fiction to jog the right side of the brain. So in the last 6 months, I'm at somewhere around 40 something books. I do a lot of commuting and a lot of traveling. So I get to catch up on at 2x speed. These audiobooks are not so fun, but I also have a massive library of books that I keep buying. The ones that I actually really enjoyed were for me, but I ended up recommending quite a few of them for executive leaders and others. The Coaching Habit is actually really good. Say less, ask more, change the way you lead. It's actually a pretty powerful book with getting folks a little bit out of their mindset. But I've read a ton, everything from mastering leadership to scaling leadership. And NLP has been a huge factor in a lot of what I do. So I've pulled a little bit into literally it's NLP, the new technology of achievement by Charles Faulkner was actually pretty good, but there was a few others that are like that.
Isn't that
So NLP is literally Tony Robbins, Chris Voss. If you look at all of the different techniques, it literally is that, right? It's neuro-linguistic programming. It's about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And it really comes into play when you start to connect it with what you naturally do. And you're like, oh, that's why. And this is how. And some people could be nefarious about how they use NLP, but if you start to understand, then you can actually build rapport. Tons of great things that you can do with that if you harness the knowledge of it. Dr. Joe Dispenza, I mean, he's got phenomenal books. I'm going to have to go back and reread Becoming Supernatural, a lot of introspective pieces. But I will say one of the books that I read at the end of last year, and I actually had a pause because it was such an incredible book that I didn't want the end of it to come too closely. It's The Wisdom of Psychopaths, What Saints, Spies, and Serial Killers. That is a book of incredible knowledge. I loved it.
Do you have any tools when you read that many books, do you have any tools to try to capture the essence of it and not forget like what you're getting out of all of it?
Yeah. Yeah. And for most of my physical books, I don't want to stop and write something. So I'll have my phone, I'll use like either Google Keep or anything, and I'll take a snapshot of the section that I want to harness. I know folks who do inline notes and notes on the front cover and summaries and everything else. And they've got this whole that's cute. I take the pictures, and then when I go back and say, what was that book? I go into my Google Keep, and then I can pull the text right from most of the apps, and that way I can quote. I also have, for a lot of these, there's either supporting site or authors. I just connected in. So I'm going to say the acronyms of the name of the book because I can't, easily say it, but it's Move On MF is the name of the book that I just picked up at the library. It's actually really good. And it talks about CBT. It talks about mindfulness, and it talks about using cursing as a mechanism to really snap yourself and others out of an development. I immediately go to LinkedIn and I link in with the author. So I've done that now for quite a few authors, and, kind of follow them bookmark them, but I also use Goodreads in order to keep track of the books that I use. There's a few others. And then the best part about it is I get books from the library. So, and from there, you can get the digital books from either Libby or Hoopla. And then I go to the bookstore. I have to stay away from the bookstore because that's one of those demons for me. I walk in with, hey, I'm only going to pick up one book, and 5 books later and 2 lattes, I'm in a whole other world.
Behind on a stack of books.
Thank you. I have 2 full shelves of books that I've backed up. Yeah. And heaven forbid somebody recommend a book to me, because then that becomes a top priority.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I think that unfortunately, it seems like reading is slipping by the wayside with a lot of people with the advent of the mobile phone.
And I'm okay with that, right? Because you've got audio, you've got podcasts, and that's great. There's a ton of learning for folks to really pick up on things. But my first job was at a library. I think I was just about 14. It's where I learned how to code. It's where I learned the Dewey Decimal System. 90% of everybody who's listening to this probably don't even know what the Dewey Decimal System is, right? But this is where, so if you told me what's in section 600, I might know. And it was a foundational piece for me. So to me, being able to have that recovery time in a book, especially if it's fiction, I can't put down fictions. That's why I can't pick them up, right? Because I will, all of a sudden the sun's coming up. I'm like, I guess I should sleep. It's really one of those decompressing pieces that I use for me, especially since we work in cyber and IT and all these other functions. So it's a therapy for me.
No, I agree. I think that's some great advice too. So you already gave me some books I need to buy now. Tell us a little bit about your career journey, because I think that's pretty interesting. Obviously, you've got a lot of experiences you could draw from, but what do you think stands out the most, and help us get to know you better?
I've spent the last 35 years or so doing a lot. For the most part, whether it was directly related to cybersecurity or not, all roads kept leading me to where we are today. I started off as a tech support, then I was an admin, then I went into the database. All along, I was doing side hustle programming. So I kept surrounding every domain around the overall infrastructure, networking, administration. And it was just wherever the next either contract took me or job took me. Many years ago, I started consulting, and I was like, why do people pay me so much money? And it became really clear to me. Number one, I was asking the questions that people weren't asking. So why are we doing this? Right? The why, because I was a neophyte. I didn't have any formal training. And no one had asked those whys. And I'm like, oh, they're hiring me for my common sense, because I'm just getting them out of their headspace. I'm just asking the questions that are neophyte simpleton type of questions. And I'm okay with saying that, because I still ask those kind of questions, but I still do Captain Obvious moment. So as I was going through doing all these things, it was like, hey, Mel, do you know Oracle? I'm like, I'll figure it out. Hey, Mel, do you know SQL Server? Yeah, I'll figure it out. And guess what? I spent the weekends and every night trying to figure out what I could do. Back then it was book. Now you've got a plethora of different training pieces. Hey, Mel, we've got a problem with the router. Well, let's look at it. Configurations, right? Everything had the same logistical piece, right? Analyze, gather information, talk to people, do some research, pull some together and go. One of my first contracts was still mind-blowing to me. This many years ago. Like, Mel, we need to come in and build out a repository system, document management, and asset management, and it needs to be available remotely. And so I just asked within a couple of weeks. I asked, what's your internal infrastructure? What do you have? What do you have? What do you have? And I was like, well, we can actually build it for free with what you have. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, we just put this, and that. And the people who brought me in were marketing people. And I'm like, okay, I don't get it, but I'll build it for you. Month and a half later, it was built, right? Latest technologies. It was internal web server. It was their back in the day. So it was the first intranet. It was the first a lot of things. And they started showcasing this all over the place. But it turns out that IT had given marketing an estimate of $1.5 million to build this. And here I come, 2 months of my lo-fi contract rate, and I had already built it. So I came back over the holidays from that contract. They're like, yeah, there's been a management shift in the IT group that you've been reporting into. We're going to get back to you. I'm like, oh, damn. So again, in my just simple mind, I was like, oh yeah, no, I think I can pull together a solution. But that carried through. And when I look at cybersecurity, when I look at the industry, when I look at resource, right, it was like, okay, I need to just very plainly and simply look at scenarios, pull in the right resources, do the right thing, make sure the teams are, and just go with the simplest explanation and path to what I need to do. So the journey has been incredible. I've had to teach myself a lot of things. I've had to motivate myself through a lot of things. And as I love to say, I've lived through the dramas and traumas,
Yeah.
from incident management to everything else. So to me, I kind of know what to expect in a lot of different organizations. And this is why I read Wisdom of the Psychopath is, am I a psychopath? Because I just see this stuff so clearly when it comes to personalities or anything else. And I realize I'm not, because I actually care, but it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in just the ability to ask good questions. And that kind of goes back to the coaching habit, right? When you're leading teams and they're constantly going to be bringing you challenges, the knee-jerk reaction is to solve it for them. But the best thing to do is to ask some questions and help
Thank
them
you.
find the answer themselves, right?
Amen. It literally is.
Yeah, I loved that coaching habit book. Actually, it was a required reading in my MBA program, my MBA leadership program.
It's the best program you've ever taken then, because it's got great foundational pieces. And when you augment that with all of the rest, right? So everything from NLP to development to executive, presence and all these, you've got a really good core. And there's a lot of books like that, right? Brian Tracy comes out with his whole series of anything is pretty damn good, right? I've read the individual little things that are specific to what I wanted to read. And a lot of his messaging is the same, but I read books now just to also validate, like, is this, oh, that's what I do. Perfect. Okay, great.
Right.
Or, maybe I should try that. So you never know, right? There's billions of books out there. You never know what you're going to pick up from one book. I remember there was an author, I think a year and a half ago, came out with a book. She had done a bunch of great things in IT. And, I was checking off the list and I'm like, oh, wow, and then an acronym came out. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And it was WAIT. And she struck core to my heart. And I'm like, wait, why am I talking?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right? Because me, we've talked, this could be a 7-hour session if you keep me talking.
Yeah.
Why am I talking?
Yeah. And staying focused on that. And often something doesn't need to be said. It's too easy to try to monopolize
Listening.
I need to.
So again, little things like that. That whole book could have cost 5 times more just for that one piece. So you never know what you're going to find in your reading.
No, that's awesome. So you've kind of spanned the gamut, right? From playing different types of roles all the way from librarian, systems administration, all the way up to CISO, right? And then you bounced in over to consulting.
I've been consulting off and on since 95.
Oh, okay.
And just decided to really flip the script. I was doing some VCIO work off and on and helping folks. I cherish everyone who does the work in those roles or in virtual contracts. But I really got to a point where the energy to fight for budgets, the energy to fight for resources, the energy to keep doing all of these things was depleted, right? I can't justify criticality and risk management over and over and over again and hitting my head against the wall to not get the results I wanted. I've tried every possible way to communicate. I think I even tried learning Ferengi and Vulcan and everything else. I'm like, whatever it is. And by the way, I've had great successes, but I've also had a lot of walls and I said, okay, why don't I look at solving the problems that I'm seeing that are being caused by these things? And a lot of what I saw was lack of executive leadership visibility deeper into the organization from a cybersecurity IT standpoint. And on the way up, lack of being able to communicate up the importance and the risks and other pieces. And then just the big gaps in the type of training. I can throw you into any of the major certifications and you've got credentials up to wazoo. So you're great in cybersecurity, but you suck at managing people. Right. And you're living in a level of toxicity where your team is, and you will call it toxicity, right? You'll call it incident management. You'll call it security operations. You'll call it whatever it is. But in reality, what you're doing is you're causing a PTSD type of first responder mentality where people are going through millions of lines of logs, and they're staring at a screen, and there's no development, no camaraderie. And guess what? You're doing it day in and day out, sometimes for 12, 24, 36 or more hours while you're trying to do forensics, or you're trying to, figure out how to close a major gap. And guess what? You never go back and recalibrate with your team to find that space and do the development and to kind of really build trust and everything else. So I said, well, a lot of management people are talking about that at the executive leadership level, and there's management development. But at the end of the day, none of the two are being combined on the cybersecurity IT or these high risk roles.
Right.
And I just said to myself, well, you know what? There's groups like Cyber Minds and Mind Over Cyber. And like, we need to put more of those kind of efforts, and we need to educate leadership, one, on the things that they do now, right? We've got all kinds of wonderful assessments that leadership goes through. But guess what? We need to bring that to cybersecurity, IT, and then do the training so we level people up. CISOs who are practitioners, but are now managing teams, need to learn how to scale up, need to learn how to manage the teams. And then folks who are board level, fantastic presenters need to understand they need to keep going back deep so they understand what the real impact is on budget cuts or not having the right roles, doing assessments with, do you have the right titles, roles, and compensation so you can retain your people, to doing that type of assessment. And then saying, by the way, you've got a really good structure, but you maybe want to level this group up here because they show most potential, and it'll help with retention and it'll help with the team dynamics. And it's stuff that I've been doing for such a long time. Now I'm purposely doing the executive leadership and the coaching to be able to kind of help with that. So I've lined up with global assessments and a lot of great partners to say, let's go, let's do this. And having such incredible success with clients. I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So you're solving the people challenges in cyber more than the technical challenges, right?
And by the way, I go into organizations, I say, why are you paying $1.2 million for that? I've got 6 vendors that'll do exactly that, each will do exactly the same at a third the cost. Then I just set them off into the sunset and right? So I've already done the startup advisory work. I've already done the, how do you build a security program with no budget? Well, save some money and use that for everything else. So and when I come in and they're like, well, we don't have budget, I'm like, I guarantee you I can find budget, right? Because the way that people think about their vendors.
So in that sense, are you a fan of like building a security program off from open source? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, not every company, and this is the other beauty, right? Having been in 4 startups, 2 IPOs, financial services, everything else, scope, scale, size is absolutely important. I'm not bringing in a Palo Alto into a startup unless I know it's a slim piece that goes in here and that's it, right? I may bring them in. I'm not bringing in anybody else. I'm not bringing in a pre-seed into a Fortune 5, right? Unless there's a real need, isolated, and there's a project, right? So you find the right scale of where to inject, how to inject it. Absolutely. Start off with the open source all day long, right? Isolate it, see if it works, grow it, and go.
Love to talk through a scenario here with you. If you were brought in to support, executive coach, support a new CISO, brand new in his role, taking over a team, what would your recommendation on first steps be?
The first step is, have you done your building trust on the leadership side and down, right? Do they know you? Do you understand what the business does, what their expectations of you are? Are there clear communications on both sides, right? The first 2 weeks that I talk to anyone, I'm building trust immediately. And I'm like, okay, listen, I'm not here to judge. We're just here to move forward. I need to learn where we're at. I need to know where the bodies are. So that's the first thing. The next piece is identifying the key skills within your teams. What do they want to do? Not what are they titled to do? Right. I can pull that up from HR, but what do they want to do? Well, I really hate scrubbing logs. Once you have that assessment and you understand the need and whether or not it's a tool, then you can start to remap skills. You can start to assign special projects. You can start to build out the kind of things you need to do for the team. Like, for example, I do things like once every other month or once a month, somebody on my team has to present anything they want, right? And you're like, okay. And they're like, well, there's not much that I can present on analyzing logs. I'm like, sure there is, but I didn't say it had to be related to your job. Right. So what I do is I develop them to say, I just want you to present. So I do the skills building, the trust piece, but then I get the message from the team that I can relate over back to senior leadership and say, by the way, you mandated me to do A, B, and C. This could be brutally, brutally impossible because here's the information I've collected, and I do my own scoring on, the different domains on people, product, this and the other process. And I would come back to them with, here's the solutions that I can put in immediately, and here's the long-term pieces. And I've done probably about 2 or 3 days, because the first thing I need to do is talk to everybody that can give me as much information to get that heartbeat. So senior leadership, if it's incident-based or if it's toxicity, if it's turnover, got it, got the direction. Now I know how to start to gather information. And it's really just about asking all the questions and not being so deep in the weeds, right? You need to be deep in the weeds to know how they're using the tools, what they're using, and maybe make a couple immediate pieces, gather the information on the environment. Do they do asset management? Where are they with access management? All the key baseline things. Like, if you get a pretty good heartbeat for those, if they're, if it's helter skelter, maybe you address those first and you do the low hanging fruit. But once you have a good baseline, you can always go back and revisit to validate that. But you just got to get all of that information. And I find the first month or 2 or 3 of engagement is the best. It is really fun to uncover, where the bodies are, why they do things, why some script kiddie created something that parses through some logs in order to be able to get the data, and then really get to a point where leadership gets a higher level of confidence and understanding. And the team really gets to see that they've got an advocate who's going to push back. What's the priority of the projects? Draw the line. Anything that needs to go above that line, what gets taken off? All of these leadership type pieces. And what I love about it is I get to go in and really shape personalities on both sides of the fence, boards, leadership, and say, well, that's it. I don't even have to go back to the team 90% of the time. Like, it's not doable unless we get rid of one of these other projects. Right. And being that shield is incredible. So, when you can accept the fact that you need to be the person who pushes, right? So pushes the team up and pushes the leadership back or in the right direction. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. I think this is lost on a lot of folks, that the primary role of a leader is to be a team builder. Would you agree with that? That's really the core function there, is to build a team.
So if you look at whether it's IT, cybersecurity, marketing, whatever, marketing, you've got to create a vision, right? Product, you've got to create a vision. As a CEO, you've got to create a vision. Why can't you do that from IT security stuff, right? So the job of anyone running any type of team is to take the vision as seen by the company and translate that into the vision as seen by the team, right? Why are we doing this? I would ask that all the time as a CIO. Why do we need to stop this project and work on this now? Well, because there's going to be a $200 million lift by the end of the year. If we do it, got it, check. Let me go back to the team and let them know we're stopping. I know some of you are going to be upset, blah, 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 but this is going to take us from 2 million to 200 million by the end of the year. Let's work on this, right? Work on the quantifiables, educating them on the vision. Why is it important? How to break it down? Is it feasible? So the same thing with cybersecurity, right? The nuances and the bullshit around, 0 incidents. How do you quantify or qualify that? If you have 0 incidents, that's a home run, right? If you've got some, maybe not, some highs in there and some mediums, that's cute, right? But if you've got no criticals and you're either not digging enough or you don't know that they're already, they completely own your system. But if you've got no incidents, it's actually pretty damn good. So being able to message that and being able to say, by the way, this is why we're doing this from a leadership standpoint. But you're right. More than a third of your job is being tactical, hands-on, and practitioner as a CISO. You're in a really small company with a really small team. If you are balancing that out with the leadership and development, perfect. But if the rest of it is you trying to justify why you need more money or why you have to go to the board or anything else, and you're not developing your team, you're not going to be successful, right? You're going to be people who are just functionally doing their job.
That can be a place where it's actually a hindrance to be able to know how to do the work from a practitioner perspective, right? I mean, when you're coming in as a leader, but you're forced to work through your team, it's a whole different perspective.
Right. I've seen them. I still see the hands-on micromanaging. They get out of my way. I'll do it faster and better. That's the kind of mold you're going to break. I don't see that often, but I still see it. I still see senior leaders who will walk you through the Ferengi speak of how they do something. And you're like, whoa, whoa. I'm like, pull it back. Can you just explain that to me in English? Because I have to explain that in English as I move forward.
Yeah.
Right. So even all of that kind of development on how to present something to your team or laterally to your team and then up, right? I can get into the weeds on scrubbing logs with you, but guess what? Senior leadership doesn't give a shit about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Not at all.
really the biggest problem that I find is knowing that you have to address it, right? Admitting you have a problem, right? Some people are like, well, no, everything's running great. I'm like, well, that's not the feeling I'm getting from your whole team.
Yeah. I think that that's
Right.
a really powerful value of bringing in a coach, right? Because people really struggle to give honest feedback, right? And for you to be that intermediary to help gather that feedback and then help people see the situation objectively almost. I
Yeah.
mean, that's got to be pretty amazing, the breakthroughs that you're able to create for clients doing that.
I will say, and again, this is why I read the book, Wisdom of the Psychopath. I'm like, how is it that I can read people so quickly and kind of gauge where 5 minute, 10-minute conversation with someone, having them intro themselves and maybe look at their LinkedIn profile, I could pretty much tell you with a high level of confidence where they're at from a mindset standpoint, where they are from everything else. And this is why, again, now I'm reading to backfill why I'm able to do this, right? The tone, the affliction, where they look, how they look, what they're doing, what they're saying, the words they're using. So it becomes really simple for me to be able to do that. Not that simple with everyone, obviously, but with a high level of practice, I've been able, and I've been coaching my teams for about 15, 20 years, but I've been coaching executives for about a decade. And I will tell you, the most redeeming, most beautiful, most incredible thing is when I get on with a client. Just had a client that I said flipped over from being a mentee to a client and had them do an assessment. What I saw from the assessment was like, oh, we need to go talk about the assessment first before we move forward on the rest of the plan. Breakthrough moment in the first 10 minutes of the call. The next 50 minutes of the call was things that they should try for the next week. The second meeting that I've had with this person who I've known for a long time. They said it was the best week that they've had in the longest time. And I'm like, well, just keep practicing. And they keep hearing my voice, right? Because I'm not a typical coach. I don't just get you out of your own headspace. Sometimes I tell you what you need to do, right?
Mhm.
And then I'll find a way for you to admit that you need to do it. It's those kind of moments where, to me, are the most redeeming of them all, is when someone actually puts something into play and it works and they see the value and they keep going and they come back for more.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. So I have a question. I want to flip the script a little bit because part of why we launched the podcast was because of we just have so many folks coming into the ISC2 chapter. They're trying to land their first role in cyber. I just got put on, I'm going to throw this scenario out for discussion because this was really surprising to me. So someone who knows me had a friend, heart surgeon, that is looking to get into cyber. So he put me on the phone with him yesterday to mentor a heart surgeon who wants to get his first job in cyber. And so we were kind of walking that through, right? And I'm like, man, traditional problem to career pivot, like you're probably at a pretty high earning scale where you are today, but you want to start over again in a brand new industry. So what would you say to someone who's trying to make their break? They're trying to pivot in from a different industry, and possibly why a coach might be a valuable strategy in that process.
Yeah. Oddly enough, one of my new clients, I was on the call with them, almost the same scenario, different industry, right? A lot of zeros in their pay. And They've gotten their certifications. They're going in deeper and deeper into cybersecurity.
Mhm.
Whether you just graduated high school or you're flipping your career, the most important thing for you to be able to succeed is to align yourself with where you can get practice.
Mhm.
Right. So it's talking to your friends that already do it, getting into organizations that already do it, not just talk about it, right? You got to get into all the organizations, every single one of them. So, it's ISC, ISACA, OC conference, whatever the hell it is, just get into it, learn, get into the webinars, everything else. But the most important thing besides that is getting practice, getting your hands on the technology, getting your hands access to it. So, and I will tell you right now, if I hear about another boot camp that's $10,000 to $30,000, it's guaranteed, blah, 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 it'll drive me batshit crazy. It's why I created the fellowship, where for $36 a year, you can get access to CISP and a lot of the other certifications. Plus, I'm trying to help hopefully build out the community that could support each other, but
Mhm.
also find all the other programs for vets and everything else. You don't have to make a massive monetary investment. So please, people, don't keep doing that. Number one. Number two, what your best bet is, be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I need help learning this, or I want to learn this. And then reach out to, again, ISC and all the other groups. I have mentoring sessions still now with every group that I go to. One or two people will reach out to me and I tell them, you put in the effort, I'll put in the effort.
Yeah.
Sometimes I got to cancel and I've got to, juggle the schedule. But I still do it for free. And the most important thing about, if you're mid to senior level in any role, you got to get a coach. You got to get a coach. It's just that simple, because there's, especially in cybersecurity, there's a lot that you're like, well, what do I focus on? I'm like, well, you may have a plan. So even in the first introductory call that's free, usually whatever, you're already set. If you have the stamina, the will, the discipline, everything else to do it, then you go off on your own and do it. And then some folks are just, they can't, right? They really want to continue to focus on that. Maybe it's a leadership role that they're looking for versus just
Mhm.
getting into cybersecurity. So it's both cybersecurity and leadership role. I've got somebody right now who, if I hear them say to me, I've got a client who keeps saying, well, I'm not technical enough to be a CISO. I'm like, first of all, you need to stop that, because not every CISO is that technical, right? You have
Mhm.
20 years of experience being a thought leader, right, in IT and other areas, and your compliance, everything else. I'm like, use that. You can pick up other skills as you go through, right? And get a little deeper if you need to. But it really is, the coaching piece for me is really to kind of break people out of their mindset, limiting beliefs, the challenges, but also, are they in the right role in the right company? And I hate to say that, but a lot of times, got another client who I just said, I'm like, there's no salvaging it. You need to bail out,
Yeah.
right? You need to get a plan to bail out, right?
How do
It
you
was
know when
just
it's
that
time to
simple.
leave?
When one person was out on leave because of the physical impact that the leadership had on them,
Mhm.
right? When you're in such an environment, whether a bro network or the cronyism that exists in a lot of
Nepotism.
organizations, and you're just getting hammered with disciplinary or other pieces, toxicity, being surveilled, literally,
Yeah.
these are real stories, right? To see, when you come in, when you leave, what you do, and you're managing the 24/7 efforts of a company, right? When it impacts not only your brain, your heart, your motivation, but you physically, when it transcends into that PTSD mode, that's and what do we do? But I need a paycheck, but I need medical care. I'm not going to find a job that pays as much. Well, that's great. Guess what? If you survive because of fatigue, exhaustion, everything else, and you get into an accident, your family's going to be well off, but you're not. So that's
Yeah.
one. And you believe it or not, sometimes I have to call people out on this. I'm like, why are you still there? Why are you still
Right.
there? The next piece is, if you've been in a role where you're not advancing and you're not learning, and your leadership isn't throwing you any kind of lifeline to be able to kind of develop or grow or anything else, and you're going to be doing the same job for the next 20 years, if that's you,
Yeah.
then you do you.
Yeah.
And then the other obvious pieces are, if what you were, the bill of goods that you were sold are not what you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure,
those
we're
are,
going to hire a team of 10 people, or you're going to be it. All of a sudden you've got two. And you're like,
yeah.
what just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen
Oh,
all of these.
those are good points. So we are way over what I scheduled with you. So, gonna close it out, I think, but, I could talk all day, I think. Why don't I ask you, I had one other question, like what's one question that you wish I had asked so that you kind of have the floor, for anything that you'd like to share?
So I've said it over the last couple of weeks. So I'll leave it as a comment for the rest of the audience is I'm burnt out talking about the conversation of burnout in cybersecurity.
Mhm.
My question that I'll throw back is what the hell are we going to do about it? And why aren't we doing something about it? Right? Stop talking about it and let's start getting real psychological safety and transformative change in these companies. And I wish somebody would ask me, how would you propose to do that, Mel? Because I've got a whole set of plans, modules, training, and everything else that I could bring into an organization. But I'm just tired of the burnout conversation. I'm like, screw you, let's do something about it. So sorry, I get a little feisty on this one.
No, I mean, it's a real one. And I think about it too a lot. And a lot of it starts with leadership modeling what they really say. Like a big one for me is if you tell people that you believe in work-life balance and you want them to get the R&R on vacation, then don't you check email on vacation as the leader because you're saying you
Right.
don't really believe that. And you're modeling that you value people who work on vacation and
you.
don't call people when they're on vacation. Don't even send
you.
an email when they're on vacation. Show them that as a leader that you truly want them to disconnect because people need to disconnect. And a big one is not 3-day weekends. You need to be gone for at least 5 days to actually feel the benefits of R&R.
Yep.
And one of the things that if your company's got enough vacation time, and for me, this is what I try to do, block out a week every quarter where I'm literally gone. And
Yep.
I'll try to do an international trip. So I'll be so many time zones away. It's like impossible.
Right.
I think leadership has to model what they say they want. Right. And it's still hard. It's still hard, but that's just one aspect.
Shannon,
We can
whatever
talk-
nefarious, I just want to say, whatever nefarious shit you're doing in in another country every quarter, the world doesn't need to hear about it. Okay. where you can't be reached. But you're right. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, if I don't have a backup for you, what your job function is, I'm the problem.
Yes. Points of failure are a big deal. And the same
Thank
thing
you.
is on a daily basis, I manage a team that's national, right? It takes everything that I can do to not log in and look at my email before 8 a.m. But the problem is if I take a call at 6:30 in the morning for the East Coast, I'm going to put a 12-hour day in. And I know that that's going to chase me all week, right? And so forcing yourself to create boundaries and stay within those boundaries, not checking email after a certain hour, at 6 o'clock, it can help a lot,
Yeah.
that burnout problem. But leadership should also intentionally not send emails to people at 7 o'clock at night.
Thank you. There's a scheduling function in almost every email package that's out there. Schedule it for 8 in the morning as opposed to at 2 in the morning.
Yeah. You'll burn your team out very quickly. I learned that very early in leadership that it's important.
We live in a Pavlovian PTSD world where we have to check everything, right? And I will tell you, I don't check a single digital footprint piece until I've had the first sip of coffee, right? That means I've got to do all my morning prep. I've got to make my bed because, you got to make your bed and everything else. And then I also try to practice atomic habit, right?
Yeah.
Right. What's the repercussion if I do those things?
Right.
Right. Whether it's physical or otherwise, how do you hold yourself accountable?
Yeah.
To say, I can't keep doing that. Right. So I sit with my coffee, not my phone, my coffee. And I just think about the morning, go through what are going to be my wins for the day. And at the end of the day, I recalibrate and say, what were my wins for the day? I go into the night with a positive mindset. I try to start the morning with a positive mindset. And then I get on my devices and then I get slammed and completely distracted. And, my wins become, vague distances until I can pull them a little closer. But you're absolutely right. It is about building a healthier culture for yourself. Why I moved out here. It's almost exactly 4 years. It's why I moved out to California from New York. I wanted to put myself where I wanted to be.
No, that's awesome. Well, I'll have to have you back on again, I think. But this was great. This was awesome. I think there was a lot here for people to really think about. And, I love your perspective on leadership, on coaching, and you're just a great leader in the space. So maybe we close on, you hit on the fellowship, maybe talk a little bit about where people can find you, follow you for more.
Yeah. Yeah. So FDG.Institute is the Fellowship of Digital Guardians. It's a free community. It's in the PBS model. You can become a sustaining member, but it's free. Post questions. The community is free. The courses are $36 and up for most of the certification sets, full year access. We do give out scholarships. So any sustaining members actually support scholarships. So we've got members from Africa, France, South America, Canada, and we've given out those. Looking to partner up with groups that are looking for the curriculum or the community or just being able to be listed so that we can branch out to you. We also have guild leaders and guild masters, basically study halls, right? So that you can actually get on. So volunteer 1 hour a week and say, I'll host people. We'll get you in as a guild leader that way. And you don't have to actually be in that certification. You could just be going for that certification. So I've got about 3 or 4 folks who do CISB certifications, the CISM, and they're just having a study hall, right? So being able to pull that together to build out more. And I've got great colleagues who have communities in Discord and everywhere else. I just branch out to them. So it's really, how do we get more traction for folks who have the questions they can't ask on LinkedIn? That's where the fellowship can help you.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome site. And I know you had made it available. I think there's a special section in there for the ISC2 LA chapter.
Yes, there is.
If I'm not mistaken. I've definitely been pointing people there. Thank you for everything you do for the community. I really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Shannon, and the rest of the ISC crew. This is why I do this, right? Is to make sure that everyone has access to information and that I can help out anyone. So thank you.